Civil Rights Movement, 1954 through 1968. The period of civil rights reform in the United States can be divided into several phases, each beginning with isolated, small-scale protests and court cases that led to the emergence of new, more militant movement leaders and organizations. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. On May 7, 1954, the Supreme Court rules that the city of Topeka, Kansas, separate but equal doctrine was unconstitutional because it violated the 14th Amendment. This ruling gave way to rise in civil liberties in America. Montgomery bus boycott, 1955 through 1956. The Montgomery bus boycott began when Rosa Parks refused to give her seat to a white bus driver. Following her arrest, a black community boycott of the city buses ensued. The demonstrations and unifications inspired blacks across the United States. Freedom Riders, 1961. The Freedom Riders began a 7-month test of 1960's Supreme Court decisions that declared segregated facilities for interstate passengers illegal. During the demonstrations, buses were ambushed by the white townspeople as the buses arrived into the city or the bus depot. March on Washington, 1963. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic I Have a Dream speech in front of a crowd of 200,000 people. This speech addressed the highly publicized confrontations between a nonviolent protesters and the Southern police forces. Civil Rights Act, 1964. Martin Luther King Jr. connections to black militancy led to the introduction of Civil Rights Act of 1964, a legislation signed by Lyndon B. Johnson. Civil rights legislation outlawed segregation in public facilities and racial discrimination in the employment and education. Selma to Montgomery, March 1965. The Selma to Montgomery March was first planned to take place on March 7, 1965, but ended before it started at the Pettus Bridge due to police presence. On March 9, 1965, Martin Luther King returned to the Pettus Bridge. The successful march was the culmination of the American freedom struggle. Voters' Rights Act, 1965. The Selma to Montgomery March prompted Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which increased the number of Southern blacks able to register to vote. The Voting Rights Act was the last 1960 racial protest that received white support. Black Panther Party, established in 1966 by 3 college students, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and David Hilliard, to protect African Americans against the police brutality. The organization gained national and international attention that could be seen across televisions during the Summer Games in Mexico City in 1968, when Tommy Smith and John Carlos gave the Black Panthers salute. Fair Housing Act, 1968, was a follow-up to Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of house based on race, religion, national origin, and sex. Decisions made during that time period can still be visible throughout the United States today.